Hello and welcome. Welcome to class 353. Are you ready? If I had been born in Brazil, and if I had grown up in Brazil, I wouldn't have learned English as well as I know it today. If I had grown up in Brazil, I would speak Portuguese today. If I had grown up in Spain, I would speak Spanish today. If I had grown up in Seville, I would have a Spanish accent like Marta's, similar to Marta's, but I didn't. I grew up in Texas. If I hadn't grown up in Texas, I would have grown up somewhere else. It's true. De no haberme criado en Texas, me habría criado en otro sitio, right? Yeah, if I hadn't grown up in Texas, I would have grown up somewhere else. Somewhere else. Yes. If my father hadn't married my mother, I wouldn't be here. If the English language didn't exist, I wouldn't be here. All right. Yes, if Marta hadn't bought those pencils, I would have bought them myself. Of course, I paid her, the company paid her, but if she hadn't bought those pencils, I would have bought them. Perhaps not the same pencils, but I would have bought some pencils. Yes. If Adolf Hitler had died in the First World War, the history of the 20th century would have been quite different. If the Germans hadn't invaded Russia or the Soviet Union in 1941, the Second World War would have lasted longer. If Napoleon had defeated the British at the Battle of Waterloo, he would have consolidated his control of France once again, una vez más. If he had won, but he didn't. He didn't. If John Kennedy hadn't been assassinated in Dallas in 1963, he would have won the elections the following year for a second term as President of the United States. If Noah hadn't been a good man, God wouldn't have chosen him to survive the great flood. Noé y su arca. If Noah hadn't been a good man, God wouldn't have chosen him to build the ark. And if Noah hadn't built the ark, he and his family would have died in the flood. If Eve hadn't been seduced by the snake, la serpiente, the serpent, she wouldn't have eaten the apple. And if Adam and Eve hadn't eaten the apple, they wouldn't have been expelled from the Garden of Eden. If Cain hadn't been envious of his brother Abel, he wouldn't have killed him. Cain was envious. Caín y Abel aquí, envidioso el Caín. Cain was envious of Abel. Why? Because God accepted Abel's offerings. Offerings are ofrendas. And God didn't accept Cain's offerings. And why didn't God accept Cain's offerings? Because Cain didn't make his offerings with a sincere heart. Corazón sincero. If Cain had made his offerings with a sincere heart, probably God would have accepted them. But he didn't. Cain didn't make his offerings. But God accepted Abel's offerings. Now, if God hadn't accepted Abel's offerings, Cain wouldn't have become envious of his brother. And Cain killed his brother because he was envious. If he hadn't been envious, he wouldn't have killed his brother Abel. And Cain left paradise. Cain went east of Eden because God sent him away. If God hadn't sent him away, Cain wouldn't have gone to the land of Nod. Moses liberated the Jews from Egypt. The Jews were enslaved in Egypt. If the Jews hadn't been enslaved in Egypt, Moses wouldn't have needed to liberate them. But he liberated them because he was a Jew himself. Moses was a Jew himself. If he hadn't been a Jew, if Moses hadn't been a Jew, he probably wouldn't have liberated his people, the Jewish people in Egypt. Now Moses was powerful. He was powerful because he grew up in the palace of the Pharaoh. Palacio del Faraón, in the palace of the Pharaoh. If he hadn't grown up in the palace of the Pharaoh, he wouldn't have been powerful. And because he was powerful, he was able to liberate the Jews, to free the Jews. But if he hadn't been so powerful, if he hadn't been a powerful man in Egypt, he wouldn't have been able to liberate the Jews. Now, he liberated the Jews because God gave him this responsibility. If God hadn't given Moses this responsibility, he wouldn't have liberated the Jews. Moses spoke to God because he went to the top of Mount Sinai, El Monte Sinaí, Mount Sinai. If he hadn't gone to the top of Mount Sinai, he wouldn't have encountered God. And Moses was able to open the waters of the Red Sea because God gave him the power. If God hadn't given him the power, he wouldn't have been able to open the seas and cross the Red Sea on foot. Many years later, David killed Goliath. Do you remember? Goliath. You don't understand Goliath. David, and Goliath. 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 Okay, David, do you remember David killed Goliath? Yes, I remember. That was before I was born, but I remember. David killed Goliath because he was an expert with a sling. Sling is una onda. ¿Se hace así, no, Marta? Es una onda, femenino. Yeah, una onda es un coche, right? Okay. Una onda. Con H, creo que es con H. You know, the number one experts in antiquity, in ancient times, in antiquity, the best warriors with a sling were Ibicencos. The best in the world, in the Mediterranean. The Mallorcans and the Ibicans were the best with Honda. Now David killed Goliath with a sling. If he hadn't known how to use a sling, he wouldn't have been able to kill Goliath, probably, if he hadn't known how. Si no hubiera sabido usar una onda bien, if he hadn't known how to use a sling, he wouldn't have killed, or he wouldn't have been able, no habría podido matar. He wouldn't have been able to kill Goliath. Now, the Jews defeated the Philistines. The Jews defeated the Philistines. Los judíos derrotaron a los filisteos in that particular battle because David killed Goliath. If David hadn't killed Goliath, maybe the Jews wouldn't have defeated the Philistines. Maybe the Philistines would have defeated the Jews. All right? Yeah, Julius Caesar. Do you remember Julius Caesar? Julio César, no las tijeras de Julia. Julius Scissors, no. Julius Caesar is Julio César. Now, Julius Caesar was assassinated because he became too powerful in Rome. If he hadn't become so powerful, he probably wouldn't have been assassinated. He probably wouldn't have been assassinated. So, this is the past conditional. The past conditional. This table is white. Ahora, this is the present conditional. This table is white because it's not black. If it were black, it wouldn't be white. Claro, eso es el presente de condicional. Esta mesa, si ahora mismo fuera de color negro, no sería de color blanco, claro. Perogrullada. All right, but yesterday the same. Yesterday, ahora sí el pasado condicional, the third conditional. Yesterday, if this table had been black, it wouldn't have been white. If I had been sick yesterday, I wouldn't have come here. If I had been sick this morning, if I had woken up with a fever or a temperature, I wouldn't have come this morning. I wouldn't have come this morning. Last week, if I had been in the United States traveling, I wouldn't have been here. So this is the past conditional. Page 343. Oui? No. Page 340. 341. All right. You have many examples. All right. Page 342. Yes, are you ready? How long does it take? How long does it take? How long did it take David to kill Goliath? It took him about 1 minute to kill Goliath. And then he cut off Goliath's head and showed it to the Philistines. And the Philistines were frightened and they ran away. Why did David cut off Goliath's head? Why did David cut off, double F? Why did David cut off Goliath's head? Well, he did this because Goliath was dead. If Goliath hadn't been dead, probably David wouldn't have been able to cut off his head. And he showed the head to the Philistines, and they were frightened. If he hadn't shown Goliath's head to the Philistines, they wouldn't have run away. So it was interesting. And David was very small. Goliath was a monster. Okay. All right, how long did it take David to complete the task of killing Goliath and scaring away the Philistines? It took about 2 minutes, probably. How long did it take? How long did it take? Yes. How long did it take Adolfo Suarez to complete the transition, the democratic transition from an authoritarian regime to a democratic system? It took him 3 years. 76, 77, and 78. The Constitution of 1978 was perhaps formally the end of the transition, although the transition continued probably until 1981, 1982. In 1981, Leopoldo Calvo Sotelo became the Prime Minister of Spain. Perhaps at that moment, I think 2 or 3 days or 1 week after the golpe de Estado, the coup d'etat, la intentona, the attempt by Mr. Tejero and company. All right. And then 1 week later, Leopoldo Calvo Sotelo became the Prime Minister in February 1981. Now, maybe that was the end of the transition. Or maybe the following year, in December 1982, when Felipe González became the Prime Minister. And so there was a change of party. And maybe we can consider the change of party as formally the completion of the transition. But really, the transition was until the approval or the passage of the Constitution in 1978. So the transition lasted 3 years for some people. It lasted 5 or 6 years for others. How long does it take? How long does it take to drive from Madrid to Toledo? Now it takes about 50 minutes. 50 minutes. Why do you say now? Well, because it used to take more. It used to take longer. Antes se tardaba más. Yes, it used to take longer. Now it doesn't take as much. Now it doesn't take as long as it used to. Fíjate, ahora no se tarda tanto como antes se tardaba. Now it doesn't take as long to go to Toledo from Madrid as it used to. It used to take longer. Recuerda used to como el pasado, sin precisar cuándo ni durante cuánto tiempo. Antes se tardaba más. Why? Well, it used to take longer because the road was a 2-lane road. 1 lane, escrito lane, carril de carretero, de calles, lane. Many years ago, there was 1 lane going in one direction and 1 lane in the other direction. So it took longer. Now it doesn't take as long. It used to take longer. And how long does it take to fly from Madrid? Well, to go from Madrid to, from Spain to the United States. Now it takes 8 hours to go from Spain to the United States. But it used to take 2 weeks by ship or 1 week by ship. It used to take a lot longer than it takes now. It used to take a lot. How long would it take Superman to fly from Madrid to Barcelona? It depends. What? It depends. What does it depend on? What does it depend on? Well, it depends on Superman's. But you see, Superman can fly at different speeds. He doesn't fly at a fixed speed, velocidad. He can decide to fly slowly, or he can decide to fly quickly. Now, if he's in a hurry, si tiene prisa Superman, and he needs to go to Barcelona as quickly as possible, he can fly. It takes him 5 minutes, only 5 minutes, to fly from Madrid to Barcelona. Now, if he's not in a hurry and he wants to enjoy the scenery, the countryside, crossing the province of Guadalajara, part of the province of Cuenca, in the area of Alcañiz, in that area, and going up to Caspe and into Flix in that area of Tarragona, and then up to Barcelona, it takes him 30 minutes. That's the scenic, la ruta paisajístico is this thing, the scenic route for Superman. So it takes him more time. But if he's in a hurry, it only takes him 5 minutes. Richard, yes. How long did it take you to to write the vocabulary booklet. 1979, 1980, de base dos. It took me, I don't know, trabajaba en rachas. I don't know. I worked in spurts. Spurts, S-P-U-R-T-S. I worked in spurts. It took me probably, well, it took me a pretty long time. I think it took me maybe 200 hours. Because to make this book, I had a dictionary, English-Spanish dictionary. And I went to page 1. This is true, eh? I went to page 1 of the dictionary in the A's, and I looked down. And the first word that I considered relevant, palabra relevante que conviene saber, I wrote it. And then I had categories. This is a database, base de datos, con sus campos. I had the raíz germánica, anglosajona, or the raíz latina. And then I had category 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Category 1 is very common, every day. It. I. Very, very common. Category 5, decepcionado, defraudado. These are category 5. Less common but important words. And so it took me a long time. I went through the dictionary, 1,500 pages, page by page, to create what I consider the important words in English. 4,500. All right. So it took me a long time. It took me a long time. All right. I wish. We wish you a Merry Christmas. I wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Te deseamos un feliz Navidad. Es un poco prematuro, right? We're in the month of May. But, por si, in case I don't see you, por si no te veo, en caso de que no te vea, in case I don't see you, I'll take advantage of the moment to wish you a Merry Christmas. So, I wish you a Merry Christmas. I wish you luck. Te deseo suerte. Deseame suerte. Wish me luck. Good luck, Richard. Good luck, good luck. Wish me luck. Wish me luck. Oh, I'm wishing you. I wish you the best. I wish you the best. Esto es desear. Ahora bien, usamos wish muchísimo en inglés. Un poco en el sentido de desear, pero más en el sentido de frustración, rabia, a veces, con el concepto de ojalá en español. Que ojalá viene del árabe, pero es, ojalá tuviera más dinero. Ojalá supiera inglés. Es rabia. Cuando dices, ojalá supiera inglés. I wish I knew English. I wish I knew English. Listen to these two sentences. Ojalá sea verdad. Han dicho que Marta le va a tocar la lotería de Navidad este año. He oído una voz que decía que Marta se va a hacer rica. Ojalá sea verdad. Ojalá sea. Aquí ojalá es I hope. Espero que sea verdad. Ojalá sea. Ahora, sé que no es verdad. Vale. Pero puedo decir, ojalá fuera verdad. Eso es I wish. Ojalá sea verdad es I hope. Hope admite esperanza de que sí. Wish, ya no hay esperanza. Ojalá fuera verdad. Pero sé que no va a ganar, no le va a tocar la lotería. Ojalá pudiera ganar mucho dinero, pero es que no va a pasar. I wish, ojalá fuera verdad. I wish it were. I wish it were. Not I wish it was. Ojalá estuviéramos en la tierra de algodón. ¿Te suena la canción? Ojalá yo estuviera en la tierra de algodón. Los tiempos ahí. Oh, I wish I were in the land of cotton. Old times there are not forgotten. Look away, look away, look away, Dixieland. ¿Conoces la canción? No. Es de los sureños en Estados Unidos, los que perdieron la guerra, los que perdimos la guerra. Oh, I wish I were. Ojalá estuviera. I wish I were in the land of cotton. Old times there are not forgotten. Look away, look away, look away, Dixieland. Oh, I wish I were in Dixie. Ojalá estuviera en Dixie. Dixie es un apodo, digamos, para el sur, Dixieland. Oh, I wish I were in Dixie, away, away. In Dixieland I'll take my stand to live and die in Dixie. I wish I were. Yes. I wish I were a billionaire. Yeah. Then I would be a powerful person. But I have to go now. I wish I could continue, but I can't. See you tomorrow.